Hi, I'm Dean.
I'm Kyra.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking to you about renting an apartment in Portugal.
And this is one of the things that many people have a lot of questions about, especially because the visa requirements to move to Portugal require you to have a residence. Back 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of people would rent an Airbnb, and then when they got here, they would look for their apartment. But things have changed. So now you actually have to have a real residence that someone can check on to make sure that you are meeting all your visa requirements.
So some people will buy a home or an apartment before they get here. They may have done a scouting trip before. A lot of people choose to rent first to allow themselves to settle in, search for the place that they really want to live before they buy, or they might just continue to rent for the foreseeable future.
And I think we talked about this a little bit in the last video, but one of the places that you can look, there are a lot of different places. Probably the most popular place to look is Idealista, Idealasta. And Idealista is really helpful, I think, if you are particularly going to buy, because there were a year before we even physically set foot in Portugal to maybe it was more like 7 months, but before we actually set foot to start looking for a place, there were places that I thought were interesting that we might think about buying. And I went ahead and got myself an account at Idealista, and I could see that some of these properties had been on the market for a very long time. And that is something to think about when you're considering renting versus buying, is that the US market moves very, very fast. We were able to sell the house that we owned in 12 days. But here in Portugal, it could take you 12 months to sell a house that you own or longer. And this is why a lot of people who come here choose to rent instead of buy.
So a little bit about our story. We came here on a scouting trip in January of 2024, and we had checked out a couple of towns and really fell in love with the town that we're in. So we decided that because we needed a lease or a home for our visa process, and we needed it pretty quickly, and we had gotten the advice to get an apartment, even if it's not the perfect one, because they do go quickly. We walked around town and we knocked on the doors of the real estate agents, and I think we hit about 4 of them, and 3 of them had nothing available. And then the last one we went to, and I was tired, I didn't even want to go, but Kyra suggested that we go, so I did. And they happened to have 3 different places available, 2 apartments and 1 house. And we decided to look at them, and we looked at one apartment that is an older apartment, but it's right on a park, and it had enough space for us, and it came semi-furnished. And that means that there were hutches and tables and chairs, but no couch and
Plates.
There were plates, a lot
Pots
of
and
plates, but not everything. So we needed to buy a couch and everything. And we were given the advice to just take an apartment if it looks good to us, because you can always move later.
True.
And one thing here is they kind of have an unspoken code, if you will, that if you offer to take an apartment and you're the person who saw it first, they're going to give the apartment to you 9 times out of 10.
So we really lucked out in that we happened to be the first people to see this apartment. So we were able to get it. I do not think, I want to talk about also the rental for the place. The price that we rented our first place for, the place we live in now, was €750. So At the time, I think it was about $812. And part of the reason we were really excited about this apartment is because we could still pay our mortgage at home and continue to pay for this place, even though we knew we weren't going to be moving right away. So that was a big deal.
One thing that that a lot of people throws them for a loop is that because you have to have a residence in Portugal as part of the visa process, you're going to be holding on to both that residence and the residence that you have in the United States or wherever you're coming from simultaneously. So you need to have something in country that you can actually afford to do that with. So Kyra was referring to us paying our mortgage before we sold our house. We were carrying both the mortgage there and the rents here in Portugal.
But we wanted the comfort of knowing that we had that apartment to go to. So, the agency took care of everything for us. And if you are looking on Idealista, one of the things that you'll see is the references for the apartments are T0, which is going to be a studio, T1, which is a 1-bedroom, T2 is a 2-bedroom, T3, and it goes on from there. And then the floors are, if it says first floor, that's actually the second floor.
For U.S. people.
So we, it's one of those things that when you're looking at an apartment and you're looking and it says lift, no lift, if it's the second floor, that's actually the third floor if you're coming from the States.
Right. Floor 0 is the ground floor. Floor 1 is actually for the United States, the second floor. Floor 2 is the third floor, and so on. So be aware that if you don't have a lift and if you have mobility problems, you might be looking at a place where maybe your apartment is on floor 0 or floor 1, so that you have an easier time getting in. And one thing to realize also is T1, T2, T3, T4 doesn't reference the number of bathrooms. And when you're looking on Idealista, you really have to look carefully because the initial listing, at least as we found, doesn't tell you right at the outset how many bathrooms there are. So you need to look at the photos or look at the floor plan if it's provided to make sure that there's enough bathrooms for you.
Yes, I would describe our apartment as rustic because it is a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. So that means we have one full bathroom and then one bathroom that has a toilet and a sink, and it's actually a converted shower, which we found out when we got here. So, just something to think about.
Rustic is a good word.
Rustic.
Yes, it's a converted shower. There's still shower hardware in the bathroom. It's gotten some laughs. It's a good conversation piece. So another thing to think about is there is sometimes a reference to a duplex apartment, and in the U.S. a duplex means 2 houses that share a wall usually, or 2 apartments that share a wall. Here, a duplex is a 2-floor building or apartment. A triplex is 3 floors, all within the same home. So don't let the terminology fool you.
Yeah. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is the reason that we planned to rent for a while. One of the things that we were looking for is we wanted a rental that was a quarter of our mortgage at home to give us financial freedom. So what that means for us is, for all the places that we visited in Europe, there's about another 150 places we have not visited. And so we wanted the financial freedom to be able to go and visit some of those places, but not worry about the overhead and maybe not worry about having a mortgage for a while because we had one and, we're really happy renting.
Another thing to realize is in the United States, generally, if you were buying a home, that's an investment that oftentimes, most of the time, will appreciate in value. That is the case here sometimes, but not all the time, and you're not going to see the appreciation generally that you would see in the United States. So for us, if we were to buy a place, it would be as an investment. And we found that in some cases, prices are going down, so it might not be the best time to buy while you're losing value. And as an investment, we're a little bit older and we don't really have anybody to leave it to. And so financial freedom now versus tying our money up in a home, for us, seems like the right idea, at least now. That could change. We could find someplace that we absolutely fall in love with that's within our price range, and then we might change our minds.
True. And we're renting because it preserves our resources. We also have the freedom to move. Let's say right now we're living in Caldish, but what if we find another town, like we go over to Foz do Orello or we go to San Martin de Porto and we find, oh my gosh, there's an amazing place over here. Well, we don't have to feel like, oh, we already bought over here and we didn't even know that this place was over here. It gives us the ability to sort of pick up and go as we want. We're not locked into a mortgage. And, if property values become uncertain, that can be an issue. We did look at a place we considered buying, but we found out that it did not appraise for what we would be paying. There was like a big gap. And so we decided we just continue to rent.
So we, as Kyra said, are renting an older apartment. I think it's about 1975. And we came in wanting to look for Portuguese flavor, a charming apartment. And we did get a charming apartment with nice tiles everywhere and, dark wood. But we were watching the Expats Everywhere channel.
Some of you may watch that with Kaylee and Josh. We watched it a lot before we actually moved ourselves.
And they were interviewing somebody, and I'm going to quote her verbatim: "Charming is cold." and that I have to give her credit because that's absolutely right. We moved into this older apartment, and a lot of apartments in Portugal that are not designed for the expat community are without heat and without air conditioning. And that was just fine for many, many years. But now that the climate is changing, you have to be aware that these old apartments, we're in a cement building. It hangs on to the cold and it can get warm, although we have good airflow. So that's not really an issue for us. So we had to buy some heaters.
And the kind of heater that you want is an electric oil-filled radiator. We found that out and we've got that, and it does heat the house quite well. And we also grabbed a couple extra blankets. It wasn't a big deal. I don't think it's a big deal at all. I still think that we've got the best of both worlds. But if you're used to being in a place where you have central heat and central air, just be aware that as you're looking for those types of apartments, you're going to pay more, because a lot of people are like, oh, I heard that coming to Portugal is so inexpensive. The average apartment that a Portuguese person is living in is going to be a basic apartment like what we have. If you want air conditioning, all modern appliances, heat, then those apartments are going to start to run you a little closer to prices from home. So just be aware of that, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I heard it was so much cheaper. Well, it can be if you're willing to forego some of the luxuries.
Yeah, and one thing also to look at in the listing on Idealista is the energy rating, the energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. And they rate them from A to F. A being the best, which means you probably have double pane windows, you have good insulation, your apartment might not be as cold as ours is. And but F is at the other end of the spectrum, where it's basically not energy efficient at all. So just be aware of that. And while I'm talking about energy efficiency, one thing that you have to realize is also the power companies give you certain levels of power. Mm-hmm. And you pay differently for those levels. And we came in here with the level of power, I don't remember what it's called, but it's a lower level of power that the previous tenants had. but we had American sensibilities, so we would like to wash our clothes at the same time as we use our oven, at the same time as we might have a heater on. So we were pretty frequently switching off the electricity. We were blowing the circuit breakers on a regular basis, which didn't freak our dog out,
It
surprisingly.
would happen, I say what Dean says, on a regular basis. It would happen like a couple times a month.
So we upped our energy level, which upped our bill maybe €25 per month, and that problem, I can't say it ceased, but it's mostly gone.
It's gone.
So Kyra was talking. Oh, also, while we're on the subject of energy and appliances and such, when you're in Portugal, it's a humid place, so consider buying a dehumidifier.
And nobody had lived in our apartment for a little while, and we were lucky. We have a friend, Sarah, who helped us out, and Sarah was running and emptying dehumidifiers because the building can hold a lot of water inside, and so you'll get like a kind of a little bit of a musty smell. So we have 2 dehumidifiers that we run on a regular basis to keep, everything from, I guess, having that musty smell. And
they're also good for drying your clothes if you can't hang them out. A lot of apartments here do not have a connection for a dryer, even though many do have washing machines.
Mm-hmm.
So most people hang their clothes out on clotheslines when the weather permits. When the weather doesn't permit, we have a drying rack and use a dehumidifier, and it works just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also on the subject of power, Kyra, I think, alluded to the water heater issue. You're going to have a smaller water heater here.
Yeah, it's about half the size, maybe even a slightly smaller, to the water heater that you would normally have in the U.S.
And it is adjustable. We found that the water was a little bit colder than we liked, so we found, with advice of a friend, we looked for the little dial, turned it up, and that was fine. But you might need to take a quicker shower than you might be used to in the United States. Otherwise, you may run out of hot water.
Or if you have 2 or 3 people in your place and everybody wants to take a shower at the same time back to back, the last person may end up with cooler water than they would like. So just something to think about. Or like, say, if you've done a load of laundry and then you decide to take a shower, and then the person, after the first person takes a shower, second person decides to take a shower, same thing.
So when you're renting an apartment here, you usually do not get all the appliances with the apartment.
But there's 2 different kinds. You're gonna have some of the apartments are fully furnished. Okay. We have a partially furnished apartment. So like Dean was saying, it came with like a piano and a hutch for the TV and some china hutches with the china still in it and things like that. But it did not have a refrigerator, a washing machine. So we decided that for less rent up front, we could purchase those things when we got here. And then if and when we moved, we would either take them with us to another place, or if the place we ended up in had all of those things, then we would either sell them to friends or offer them to our landlord to leave in the apartment. So now he has a fully furnished apartment. So just be aware that when you're looking at those ads, some of them come fully furnished with, air conditioning and heat, but for the most part, you're going to pay a little bit more. One other thing, be aware that when you rent, like when we first rented, the apartment was $750. Now, in the States, when you rent for $750, it's $750 for the terms of the lease. So if you have a 2-year lease, it's $750 for those 2 years, and then you negotiate, it goes up. Here, the government sets a percentage. So we went from $750 to $766.20 for this year. So just be aware. I mean, that's still a very reasonable rent here, but just be aware that it's a slightly different than it is in the US. And then there will be a term in your lease which will say either 60 days or 4 months notice that you need. If once you go past that first year on the lease, you need to give either 60 days or 4 months notice to the landlord that you are leaving the apartment. So be aware of that and don't get caught up. Otherwise, you will owe extra money.
And also, while we're talking about payment of rents, you pay the rents 1 month in advance. And that was a little confusing for me. But so if you're paying the February rent, you would pay that by January 1st. So you're always a month ahead. And that also goes for when you're renting the apartment. You usually give like a 2-month deposit plus the first month's rent, and you're paying that first month's rent 30 days before it's actually due. So when you finally move in, you're a month ahead of the rent, but it just goes all the way through like that. That's the way it's done here. So do your math carefully.
And just be aware, this is specific to Portugal, but not necessarily uncommon for other places as well. But what I would say is there are some Facebook groups, there are some different groups for the different towns you may want to live in. And you can go on and you can ask a lot of specific questions. And usually the groups have, at the top, there'll be like files that you can go in and look through. And it'll have, what the average rental is for that area. And that way you'll know, like, am I overpaying? Am I underpaying? But normally the bigger the city, if you're going to Lisbon, if you're going to Porto, you would be paying a little bit more than we would pay for the same thing here in Caldas.
I want to talk a little bit about pets. In Portugal, if you have a pet, they are legally not really able to evict you for that. There may be terms in your lease that don't initially allow a pet. We haven't seen that. For us, our lease is silent on pets, and we have a dog. And the landlord legally can't kick us out because of it.
But when we moved, we did ask because we knew we wanted to get a dog. So we asked, would it be okay for us to have a pet? And he said, a dog. And he said, yes, a small dog, which is what we have. Sometimes when we're taping, if you hear like a little pitter patter and a little, it's her walking around while we're taping.
So just be aware that chances are you'll be able to have a pet, but that's not a done deal for everybody. Check the terms of your lease, and some people will rent an apartment and bring in their pet later, knowing that they can't be kicked out for it. But do your due diligence. So we lived in New York. We've seen a lot of crazy apartments. We know. We saw one apartment that was all linoleum everywhere. But we know that every apartment's not for every person. We settled into a place that we're quite comfortable, that we know that some people wouldn't be. Some people, want the more modern apartment, want the more modern appliances, and that's completely understood. So our experiences are different than what other people's experiences would be. This is what works for us.
Yes.
Just understand that you can find something much more fancy than we have, but you'll pay more for it. You can certainly find things on par with what we have for a reasonable price. Just do your due diligence. Look on Idealista. Look back on our video on scouting trips, because if you can get your feet on the ground in country and look at apartments, that would be advisable.
Yeah, we're pretty convinced that because this apartment didn't really go on Idealista, we got it before it went on. They had put it up to go on, so we actually had the apartment by the time it went up on Idealista. So we're convinced that if we had not physically been in country with our feet on the ground, we would not have gotten this apartment. And we've got tons of space. We love it. We have a nice balcony. where we can go out and sit and read. We've got, it's a lovely apartment. It's got a built-in desk that we use. So there are a lot of great things about it. Yeah, it's a little chilly in the winter, but we can deal with that. You just get another blanket. It's not that big of a deal. But we are aware that some people would be like, no, I need all my modern comforts. I have to have this, 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 this. But for us, the priority was a less expensive apartment and, maybe being able to go someplace else for 3 weeks, go to Greece or go to Italy and spend a little time in some other places, because we're like, if we're in Europe, we're definitely going to be traveling. And we knew that was one of the things that we wanted to do. So for us, having that lower overhead was the priority.
So please stay tuned for some of our future shows. We really enjoyed speaking with you today. If you liked this video, please like it and subscribe. And please check out some of our other videos. And we'll normally be dropping videos on Wednesdays and Sundays.
Wednesdays and Sundays.
All right. Thanks a lot. And
have a great rest of your week.
All right. We'll see you on the road.
Bye.